All right, this is Ultimatesage, also known as the Yorikiro in other areas. My battle navigation able to ultimate guide. We're going to be going over BNAV situations, what situations you want to aim for or avoid, improving your thought process and your mentality for BNAV. We're not going to go too much in depth on this, but a lot of it is just the thought process of how do we improve at the puzzle and what are we trying to do exactly. Dealing with bad matchups, like if you're on a sloop versus a longship, for example, or a Fanshan, or a few other bad matchups specifically in the game. The sloop is probably the worst and the most common, so that's what I'm going to go over. The best way to reach ultimate rank, and last but not least, farming Kraken's blood. I don't know if you guys know this, but I am a prolific KB farmer. I'm trying to farm for the trophy. I've gotten as much as 13 Kraken's blood on a single pillage. Let's get started. So who am I and why should you listen to me? I'm Ultimatesage, aka the Orc Hero. I've reached Ultimate in Battle Navigation. I've done the puzzle probably thousands of times. You may have seen me on the notice board. I regularly run 12-hour pillages. I've done Baglas, I've done sloops, I've done Grand Frigates, War Brigs, everything. I've done straight line, normal pillages. I've done elite pillages. I've done hunts for the Brigand Kings. I've done werewolves, vampires, those kinds of things. I've been BNAVing pretty much since I started the game, playing it about 17 years ago. Probably about 18 years, but I had an account that I played for a little bit, forgot the details, and I came back to another account. Um, so I'm also the senior officer on one of the largest crews in Emerald, the League of Shadows. I'm also their battle navigation instructor. I run classes on teaching people how to run battle navigation. I made other YouTube videos. You may see them on the channel, and I wrote a pillaging guide. Also wrote the officer's code. I'm kind of lazy on this one. Not gonna lie. I didn't feel like doing a lot of graphics on this. So I basically used Paint to quickly mock up some stuff for this presentation. So my initial disclaimer: I am definitely not perfect. Um, Basically, I pretty much don't run Cades. I have the ability to, I definitely do, but I don't commit myself enough to do that, and it's a very big boys club kind of thing. So just not really my thing. There are a lot of styles on how to play this. This is just how I do it. This is specifically for PvE. Okay, PvP is a whole other ball game. Largely because you have to be able to think in a lot of different ways. And you have to figure out who you're playing against and what style they have, and things like that. Whereas Cades are much more macro, and designated who gets what points and what to protect, and you have to have like a shot caller and stuff like that, and making decisions on whether or not to give up a certain flag and different things like that. Um, and so PvP requires a lot of different skills. If you do want to practice PvP, I recommend using Cadesim. There's a Discord for that. If you're in a big crew, just talk to your senior staff and ask if they have a link to the Cadesim Discord. You can find matches where you can practice Cades and practice PvP that way. That way you don't lose anything. Also, as a quick note, I am trying to get together a PvP workshop so people can practice. We're in the midst of starting that, hopefully soon, where we'll be having people within our crew fight each other in sloops to practice their battle navigation. Okay. So, general rules, okay, for battle navigation. Number one, you have to avoid areas with whirlpools and winds. You need to reach the open ocean. Try not to rely on last second moves too much. We'll go on more on this later. Gunning and firing, this depends on the ship. So we'll go in a bit more later, but basically the general gist of that section is going to be, based on your style is, do you want to fire more or do you want to be more conservative? On larger ships that use large cannonballs, it's a little bit more expensive. And it really depends. On smaller ships, though, it is a lot harder to have someone where you can fire all the time. Most of the time, you're going to use a mercenary for gunning. Let's be real. Mercenaries do about, I believe, 2.5 to 3 cannons around in that neighborhood. And so a lot of the time, if you're trying to fire, if you're on a sleep, you can't fire full cannons around. It's just not going to happen. Especially because there's so much movement, you kind of want to limit how much you're shooting there to make sure you have guns if you get a really good opportunity. And there, of course, are exceptions to the general rules, and we'll go over those as we go. So avoiding winds and whirls. Long story short, bots use them a lot better than humans. Okay, so there are advanced collision mechanics in the game. So basically, very few players know how every single situation with the collision will go. It depends upon ship size. It depends upon if it's with a wind or not, if it's in a whirl. Those type of things can affect you in different ways for your collision. And so the bots will always know exactly what's going to happen from a collision and from a whirl and from a wind, and they can read your moves. So what they'll do is they'll do something called hard reading, in which case they read your moves and they directly counter you, and then they'll use the whirlwinds in a weird collision to get an early grapple. So basically, you want to avoid winds and whirls if at all possible. The only exception to this is going to be if you're going to be using winds and whirls in a way that kind of puts them in a trap. So, for example, if there's a wind, there's two winds and there's a rock passage, right? And you could force them to go in there. A lot of times you can force them to max off that, especially if it's like a weirdly generated tunnel where they can't get out of it no matter what they do. They'll get max from it, pretty much guaranteed. Another one is if it's late in the battle or on low moves and there's a whirlpool in the middle of the open ocean. They'll often go in there, and you can actually park one end of the whirlpool where unless they're moving about, you'll get hits about 2 out of 4 times unless they move to change the rhythm. Um, Addition to that, early grapples are the number one sources of losses probably. The game is kind of balanced, is designed around, especially at the higher difficulties, where you actually make a decent amount of PO for playing and winning. That you have to have an advantage in the puzzle in order to win. So if you go in there and it's just empty, empty, you're almost certainly gonna lose, unless it's a really, really easy bot, and those you get like 350 pre-cut instead of like 900, 1,000 or more. Another exception to the rule: single wins in open ocean. So I have a picture here. It's like this. Two winds work, but one wind is better. So what'll happen a lot of the time is they'll use the wind, and then if they're low on moves, all they have, what they'll generate first is forwards, and so they'll end up staying still. All you have to do in that situation is get at the top of the headwind, and then what'll happen is you'll be able to just pummel them over and over again, and they get an easy grapple after a max. Why to use the open ocean? Um, so it allows you to use what I call naval patterns. These are basically just shot patterns, things like that. We'll go over a few here in a bit. These is by no means an exhaustive list. It's just an example of a few ones you can use. So if there's no winds and no whirls, that means the bot has less options. So they're much more likely to use the same sets of moves against you that you can learn and then use to counter. More variance equals potential to get shot. High difficulty voyages, and if you get shot out on those, you will probably lose. I will say max is a lot easier to win than 0-0. So if it's a choice between maxing and getting an early grapple, obviously choose the max every time. You could, even if you have the time and you feel like it, if they engage, you could always disengage and re-engage them. I don't do that personally. I feel like that's largely a waste of time. I'm usually fairly confident in my battle nav and in my sword fighting ability that I can usually win max. Um, now, so if you're required to play slow, so if you're in a bad matchup, for example, wins and whirls give the bots free moves. So that means they have a better move economy, and you don't want that. So to get to the situation first in our naval patterns, so in order to use these naval patterns, we first have to get to a good position. That means we need an open area, as much as open area as possible. Obviously, the maps are randomly generated every single time, so there's not always going to be a great spot to use it, realistically. However, all you really need is something that's like a 3x4 of this area that just has no winds directly adjacent to it. This kind of area is not perfect, but it works. And so we want to get them in a position that we can easily abuse them and we can easily reproduce. And so an important thing to use is one of our positions we'll use is what I like to call the easy L. So it's a long elongated L shape. So this actually differs based on the type of ship you're playing against. So if it's like a long ship and they have 4 moves, they'll need to be in this position here with the F. So that's like for fast. And so what it'll be is if they want to directly come to you, they have to take a turn, and then even if they move all the way they have forward, they can't grapple you. There's a slow ship, which is like most of the ships that I play. They have one less move. It's a lot easier to navigate against, in my opinion, and they can be a little bit closer. I think it works a lot better with the slow ships, but you know, It just really depends on your flavor, really. And so the goal here, of course, is that if you're in this position, you just want to fire as much as possible, and then when they turn, which they inevitably almost always will towards you, they get shot a lot, and that slows them down and gives you more ability to use the loops that we're going to talk about here in a second. So, so the goal of all of our positions, besides this one, but all of ours, is to stay outside of the maximum grapple range until we're ready to be grappled. It's okay if they grapple us if we want them to. Okay? Whether or not you grapple them or that they grapple you, that doesn't affect your score. What matters is how damaged they are when when you get grappled. Okay? We want to be able to threaten anytime they move towards us. We want to be able to threaten them with cannons, preferably without us being shot back, right? Because a good score means a lot easier of a fight. It means a more decisive win, which means a higher ramp. So the AI, as a default, especially at the higher echelon, will go towards aggressive grapples, which means if you're in a position, like if I was one section closer, they would like turn right, move forward, and then turn again and then grapple you that way. And by default, the AI will turn in a situation if you're teed towards the area you're facing. Um, so this position also sets up for what I call loop barrage and chaining loops. So we'll go over that here in a little bit. As you can see, no moves they can take can grapple us if we're in that position. And this most likely results in that they take a lot of damage from the moves they're probably going to use. Um, so this is the best position to be in. You want to aim in this position whenever possible. Getting into this position is kind of hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's not necessarily super easy, especially because terrain's random. It's not like it's a static board, and so a lot of it just depends on what they're gonna do. Sorry. Um, Okay, so now what I call the loop. So this is applicable not just in this position, but a lot of positions. This could also happen even if they turn into anyway. In any case, when you can use this is when you can turn twice and then be out of the range no matter what. Then you can and they're facing you. Then you can turn twice and shoot them. You often won't get all shots down, but sometimes you will. And this goal essentially it's like kiting them. You're able to stay out of their effective range and hit them the entire time. Um, Now you can continually do this in the opposite direction over and over and over and over again until you hit the edge of the wall. That's the only concern you really have for the limitations of this, and there are a few things you can do um, here and there, depending on your actual terrain, to kind of get and reset in a different direction. Usually, what ends up happening for me as I get them in the easy L, I do a loop a couple of times. Then it gets into, and if I run out of room, I'll use the. We'll go over here in a second, but I'll let them tee me. I'll let them get in a position where I'm on the top of the tee, and I use that to reset the direction. Um, so if they take a lot of damage, instead of looping again, you can just let them grapple and they take two shots for it. So if they're in a position here where that second green is, and I decide, well, they've only got two shots left for the max, I think it's perfectly fine here to sit here and just shoot. And what's going to happen is they're going to move forward, they're going to grapple you, but they're going to be maxed by the time they grapple, and that's fine. You'll take a little bit of damage from the ram, but who cares? Um, that's basically what the loop is. So the T. Teeing is bad usually. If you're on the top of the tee, it's not that bad realistically, but unless you know what you're doing, it's bad. And if I'm going to warn you, if the bots do a hard read, you will get grappled. There's nothing you can do about it because there's only one way to prevent them 100% from grappling you, um, and that's going forward. Now, if you decide to, well, I guess 95% because I still can read you. Now, if you decide instead to do a left, they can do a hard read and grapple a left. That happens a lot more. The way I found to most consistently get out of a T where I'm on the top is to go forward, let them turn left to collide, and doing a double turn, and then using that to shoot them. So the T is good to follow up on a loop. It can force grapples. It can be extended to get good damage. You can get hard raid, like I said, but it's pretty rare. I've only ever had it happen a couple times. It does feel like crap when it happens, but there's nothing you can do. Getting teed is terrible. So getting teed means that they're on top of the tee. You can get out of that, and we'll go over that. But it's really conditional, and I wouldn't recommend it if at all possible. You want to avoid it almost at all costs. Um, so the person on top of the tee has all the control of the situation. They can decide what's going to happen more or less, and that's in a terrible position to be in, especially in PvP. Now, If you know more about collisions than your enemy does in PvP, so a lot of the time, if you're especially fighting people who aren't very good at PvP and aren't like used to it, they may not expect this. So you can use this falling move here in a second. I'm going to show you to get out of a team and do some serious damage if you ever find yourself in one and they're fairly inexperienced. A lot of people don't know about how the collision mechanics work, um, and so this is something that you can use if need be. So I'm going to go over getting out of the T if you're in control. Okay, means you're at the top of the T. Use the following move and pound to get out of it. Forward, double turn, then fire. Okay, you don't even have to fire, but it's to punish potentially and even out the damage. So you go forward. And what happens is this person attempts to, because remember they always turn in the direction that you're facing, and so what happens is they end up behind you and they collide. That does half a point of damage, half a small cannon, usually. And then if you're an equal size, and so then you do a double turn, and I always fire at all stages just in case they didn't turn at the same time. And then usually they go forward as well. And so what ends up happening is they'll fire in the opposite direction most of the time, and they'll take about two to three cannon side, 2 to 3 cannon rows of cannon fire as a punishment. Um, so it also the double turn will damage them most of the time. Can be hard red and as a result in the grapple anyway. That's if they go forward when you try to turn. But again, that's really rare. So I wouldn't expect that to be that much of a problem. I still do it 90% of 99% of the time it works out. Getting out of a T, you are not in control. This does happen to the best of us. Well, I mean, sort of. Like you know, you never want to be in this situation, but sometimes if you're in the middle of a whirlpool and do some weird collision bullshit and it happens, there's nothing you can do. You do what you can to get out of it. So, long story short, if you're not equal size, you're gonna get grappled. That's just gonna happen. Uh, I can think of maybe like one time they didn't grapple me. Nice, that was a bug, right? It's not something that's normal. So you have to be equal ship size, and that's not meaning you have to be the same ship. You have to be equal ship size. So, for example, sloop cutter, things like that, or in this case, a grand frigate. That's why I think the grand frigate is like really, really good, especially to learn pillaging. The only problem with learning pillaging is if you fuck up on BNAV with the grand frigate, it's kind of expensive because stock is expensive. However, it's easier to play than a sloop. It's not even a comparison. Sloop has terrible matchups. Um, and you don't have nearly as many mercs to bail you out if you fuck up. Whereas on the Grand Frigate, especially if you're not in super high difficulty, the mercs will just carry you even if you. I mean, honestly, I think you could win on a Grand Frigate if they have 3 lines of damage and you're maxed, and it's like a low difficulty. You could probably run that. That's how much of an advantage the Grand Frigate is. You always don't make that much money with it, especially with the low cost to allspice right now. But I think it's still good to learn. It's just expensive. So in order to get out of this, if your size is equal, is you need to go forward into them. What'll happen is you will stay put and they will be knocked back one. And then you could turn twice, like turn right and then left or left and then right, whatever you want to do, and then shoot them with that. And this works sometimes in PvP, especially like I said, against someone who's not necessarily that great. If you get attacked randomly by someone who has no idea what they're doing, and you'll punish them really hard for that. I'll go into it later though, but PvP generally isn't worth doing unless it's just something where those people are pissed off at each other and using it to grief, basically. Um, one second. All right, all right. So, generally speaking, though, you want to avoid getting T'd. Now, if you're at the top of the T, you can choose to do that and just let them grapple. Now, if you're at the bottom of the T, you're not equal size. Guess what? Suck it up. You're gonna have to turn and shoot, and the bot's gonna grapple you. That's just what's gonna happen. Um, I mean, I would put moves after it, assuming they don't, but they probably will. Realistically, that's just how that goes. Um, it's not a situation we want to be in, but if you do end up in that situation, we want to know how to control it if we can. So to avoiding getting stuck, obviously this diagram, like I wasn't gonna go into a match and then take my rating to find a thing where I put myself against a wall. This also applies if you're against like a line of rocks or anything like that. So in a situation like this, we can't get out, right? Because if we turn right, we'll ram against the wall and be stuck. we go forward, what's going to happen is they're going to turn and grapple us. If we try to turn left, they're probably going to go forward and grapple us. Um, it's just the basically we have no real way out. So the best thing we can do here is just fire as much as possible. And what's going to happen is if they delay a move, we'll get 3 shots. If they don't delay a move, they'll go forward once, get shot, turn, grapple, they get shot again. At least that way we get the most out of it as we possibly could. Now, this isn't necessarily always a bad position to be in if you know that by the time you get grappled is they're mostly maxed or already maxed. Because that way you take minimum damage and you're not getting shot up trying to grapple them. So yeah, yeah. So I mean, this also applies to other situations, not necessarily against a wall. A couple of times if you're back forward in another space where if you go forward, they have a chance to grapple. If you go left, they have a chance to grapple. If you go right, they have a chance to grapple you, depending on what it is. Because like winds and stuff like that can manipulate it. If there was like winds coming from where the wall is, and if I turn right, it puts me in the position of being forward. If I turn left, you know what I mean? Things like that can result in being grappled, regardless of what you do. So if those cases, just take the least risky one you can, or at least get the most out of it that you possibly could in that situation. All right, so this is important. I try doing this every single time. And guess what? When I get it, it feels great. And it basically snowballs to me being out of control. So what'll happen here is early, like super early, like the first round of the match, 99% of the times, the boss will simply take the most direct route towards you. You can abuse this. So here, for example, this is an actual match I was in against I believe it was Imperial Fanchan. And so I predict since they're gonna go forward towards, they're gonna take 2 turns and a forward. Since the font only has 3 moves, what I'm gonna do is on the second turn, I'm going to turn right and then shoot twice. And so at the very least, I should get 1 shot, and that's what happened. Is I got 1 shot out of that because they delayed a turn for the turn. Lame happens. So when you get shots on them, if you get two, you can get 2 shots. Sometimes you can get 3, depending on if they're on winds and if you spawn close together, things like that. Um, and this actually snowballs in your favor because what happens is they get damaged, they get built, it reduces the efficiency of their sailors, and they have less moves to work with. And they almost always generate forward tokens first. So what happens is if you get them in a situation when you damage them a lot, all they're going to do is move forward. That makes them very easy to predict. It makes them easier to grapple because you can just get behind them, shoot them until they move forward. That's the famous grab maneuver, and then turn twice and then grapple them there, and loop the turns if you have to in order to grapple and whatnot. So it's a very good thing to get off early where you can shoot them and get that initial damage down. So general school of thought. So basically, BNAV is more or less chess, but there's only 2 pieces. Some shits can only move the direction they're facing. That dramatically reduces the potential number of moves they can make. It's not like they can go in 50 million directions. Um, Now, their potential moves expands proportional to the resources at their disposal. So if you hit them a lot and they have low moves, they have low resources, they can't really do anything. However, if you haven't hit them and they're a very high difficulty bot, they get what I call diesel engines. They have essentially unlimited moves. I see this most often with things like vampires. For some reason, especially in sloops, they just go fucking berserk. They just have a shit ton of moves, and they're just massively a pain in the ass. Really, I hate doing vampires. Um, so in PvP and caves, you would need to account for potential maneuvers. But fortunately, against bots, against normal pillaging, you don't ever have to worry about maneuvers. For those who don't know, there are things where they can turn in place. They can move forward to like a dash twice, and they can also shoot chain shot that removes your tokens. So you have less moves to work with. Um, so damaging the ship makes it easier to win the fray because it builds up damage on their board, as you should know this, and reduces the enemy moves, which is really, really important. That's why even getting a couple of their shots in is super beneficial. The snowball effect essentially is if they can't move, they get shot. They get shot, they can't move, they get moved, they get shot, right? So it snowballs, it gets in a much bigger, bigger, bigger advantage as you go. The key is that when you do get them maxed, is grappling them without getting blown up yourself. So So, quick note on PvP for people that don't pillage that much or just learning B nav, things like that. Pretty much, it's really uncommon. 99% of PvP happens in blockades, not in open ocean. Um, Generally speaking, if you are getting attacked, it's because you're targeted. Um, if you know if you're gonna attack consistently anyway, make any one off any officer could just one off attack people, but usually it requires you to be within the right echelon and the mark within a certain range of the might ring. Because if they do attack someone who's super weak compared to them, they'll get black shit. They lose everything. Um, and the thing about it is, though, is it's just the game kind of discourages PvP, even though it's enabled, because you get virtually nothing, right? You only get what's on the ship. Most of the time, when people are moving along the ocean, they're transporting ships, they're doing small pillages. They don't do super long pillages. It's rare that there's super long pillages. It's rare they have anything worth taking. So most of the time, most fights are due to politics and people getting pissed off at each other and just taking it out by trying to harass their officers. Um, it is a PvP game. That just happened. If you're at war when you're on a PvP match, I highly recommend just attempting a disengage. If you're at war though and you're getting attacked, chances are they're not willing to disengage, but you could always ask. Um, so if you're at war, your ship can be sunk if you're full damage. If you are at war, if they do grapple and they win the fray, or do you win the fray, whoever wins the fray gets all of the stock and all of the booty, meaning no re-engage is possible. Because guess what? They're not going to have cannonballs, they're not going to have rum, they're not going to have shit if you win. So keep that in mind. Um, Now, one thing that can happen, I believe it can. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you get attacked and you win the fray and it's war, you get all their shit. Guess what? You can just attack him right back. Usually, I think, pretty sure, and then just sink him. Now I think about it, maybe that's not possible. I can't really remember. It's been a long time since I've been in a PvP match. People don't usually fuck with me. Um, Now, if you are attacked, and this isn't like a war situation, it's just like a random PvP, you can use the Vihu command with the ship name to see who's naviging the ship and then send them a polite tell asking them to disengage. If you do get this, I recommend, and it is polite to do so just to disengage. Again, PvP, you get so little of the booty, you get so little of the hold, it's not worth it. It really isn't. It's just, there's no point. It's just a waste of years and their time. Um, Now, if you do have booty on board, they're not willing to basically piss off and they won't disengage. I recommend you just running away at your maximum speed, and then just avoiding getting shot, and then just hit disengaging at the moment it comes up. If you haven't been hitting a few turns, if you don't notice, you can end the battle by hitting the disengage button just above back to deck. Um, so we can go better. Now, here's a general strategy, the general thought process really against PvE. There are two schools of thought really, slow and fast. So slow means it takes a while, but it's usually more consistent. So what happens is you run away, they chase you, it drains their moves instead of you hitting them, and then you can abuse a single last second move to heavily damage them, hit them like 3 to 4 times in a round. And that means it completely drains all their moves, and then you just pummel them again, and you grapple and you're good. The cons is that it takes a lot more time. Battles can go, sometimes battles could be 15, 20 minutes depending on exactly what's going on. Especially like if you're not necessarily great, you're just learning BNAV, and this strategy can take a while to get into effect. Pros is that it's more consistent. Personally, the only time I run slow is if I'm against a really terrible matchup and I really want to win. I think it's a KB carrier, my ramp is high, things like that. I'll do that, but it just takes a while. I hate doing it. Fast. So the way fast works is that you attempt to get the early initiative by hitting them with shots in the opening if you can. And whenever you're moving around, if they're in winds, if they're in rolls, if they could be there, you're firing. This does waste a lot more cannonballs. Um, so it's a little bit more stock dependent. But I always carry an abundance of cannonballs because I know how I am. The cons of this is it takes a lot of skill to really pull off consistently. If you're not careful, you can get shot up a lot. Even if you are careful, sometimes they just do something you don't expect and get shot a lot. Man, it happens. Um, Pros, it is much faster to win with. I can often win. I can often have the fray ending within 10 minutes, easy. And sometimes I'm able to grapple within 2 to 3 moves. Um, So as a result, is this is a lot harder to do, but usually make more profit per hour as the battles are much quicker and battles are your source of income for your pillages. Um, so so the tips of slow for the slow style is use the winds if it puts you in a direction you want to run. Use the winds and save your moves, and then use your moves to get away further for the next round. Same thing with whirls. Additionally, if the bot stops moving, which is a con of the slow, really, but it doesn't normally happen. Just really depends on difficulty. Um, they may not. They may stop moving if you're not putting in move tokens and you aren't running. They may stop moving. They may be ways away, and they're not chasing you. What can happen is that happens long enough. You keep playing rock, like for example, ring around the rosy, run a bunch of rocks, and you can't get to them. You don't hit them. They can disengage. They can literally disengage. They can go poof, and the battle's over. And you get nothing for your time. That's only ever happened to me like once. Um, it was a Burger King. I was shot up from the previous battle, and I got to Burger King, and I used the time to repair. By the time I got over to them, they disengaged, and that sucked. So another thing, adapting to the rank of the AI. So there are a few important things to note regarding the AI difficulty. Imps, Imperials, the highest rank, navigate differently than almost any other rank. Even among Imperials themselves, there's a spectrum of difficulty. KB carriers, aka Kraken Blood carriers, are on a tier of their own. They are a lot more aggressive, even more than the others, and they're a ton more difficult in the fray. Like they could have no blocks and they'll insta you. If I get insta and it's super early, and I'm like, well, they probably have Kraken's blood because my screen's full of blocks. They didn't have shit. But that happens. Now Imperials are much more aggressive. They go for early grapples if you're within their range. They'll hard read you to do so. This is why it's important that we're careful to making sure we look at every possible move they could take, including wins, and we stay away from wins and morals to make sure they can't grapple us. And they're much more willing to trade shots. So if you're in a position where they could hit you, possibly, if you're ever in a position where like if you turn right, you could get hit, they will fire. And so so basically it's a lot more likely for you to be damaged when you grab them. Lower ranks are harder to predict. Because often they do some random shit sometimes. I mean, I don't even know what the fuck they're doing half the time. They'll go and go off in a random fucking direction and just run away for some reason. It happens. Um, but they're more likely to run away if they do get hit a lot early. It can be annoying, but usually it's not a big deal. The only time it's a really big deal unless it's really annoying, it happened to me actually. I mentioned in the video. I was against high impure. I was high in ramp. I managed to randomly fight vampires, I believe, and they had unlimited moves, and they ran away for 45 minutes. I spent 45 minutes chasing them. Beyond annoying. It was ridiculous. I ended up grappling them eventually, and I won. But it was absurd. They just would not come close to me. But normally that doesn't really happen. Usually higher ranks that tend to have a higher move generation. Normally they're a lot more aggressive and they don't tend to run away. That's good. So you always want to check the rank of the ship that does spawn. This allows you to tell your approximate ramp. If you have Imperials, that means you have the minimum, not the maximum, but the minimum ramp needed to start spawning ships that can carry Kraken's blood. Now, if the ships are perfectly countering your moves, they are hard reading you. It does happen. It's difficult to avoid. However, once they do it, you know that they can do it, and they're going to be doing it. So you want to start to play slow. You want to gain distance, wait for them to come to you, and then keep an extra distance away, and just shoot them as they come into range. And you don't want to be like super playing it super close, because they'll be super aggressive and they'll be trading back to you as much as possible. Now, if they are aggressive and hard reading you, their ramp is really high, and there is a good chance it could be carrying Kraken's blood. It's not always guaranteed. I fought some really hard ships and never had Kraken's blood. But normally they will. It just really, really depends. I do have a Kraken's blood farming section. It's later in the slideshow. All right, so last second moves. Um, So last second moves is waiting until the last possible moment to input your moves. This gives you advantage if you're done correctly. The bot won't react to what you're doing. Often they'll do nothing, especially if they're relatively low in moves. This allows you to quickly turn into a position where you move once or twice and you just hit them 3 to 4 times, and that just it knocks them out of the water. It is your trump card as Naver. So, but using it too much is bad because what will happen is the bot will start to do it as well. And if I found that they tend to have a lot more moves available once you're in this position, so you should be careful when you do it, and don't do it twice in a row unless you don't have a choice. Because once after twice in a row, then they'll start to really start using it. It's best to use it either get out of a difficult situation or to significantly damage the enemy vessel by just shooting the fuck out of them. Now, bad matchups. Oh boy. So bad matchups when you're significantly outgunned, right? And the enemy ship also has a significant durability advantage. The best example of like a bad matchup of a terrible matchup actually is out of a sloop and a longship. Longship's got the same amount of moves. It's got twice the durability, and it fires like 3 times as hard. It's insane, and they have a lot more pirates on board. So even if you do max them, they're still pain in the ass to beat. It's it's the benefit of a sleep is that you can have elite pillages on a sleep because it's a lot easier to fill good players. Um, so a longship has the same amount of moves. Again, it takes 9 versus 4 shots to max. Maxes a sloop in 3 broadside because they almost always fire twice. On top of having a lot more pirates on board. Um, the advantage matters more for the pirates than the number of pirates you have. It matters more the smaller amount of real pirates you have. And the sloop has at least at 7. So what it means is that, like, for example, believe it or not, even though, like, if you're on a war frigate and you're facing a grand frigate and the grand frigate could have 150 people, even at 75 versus 150, it's not as bad as having 7 versus like 13 because what happens is the more pirates there are, the more significant and more compounded the actual advantages from the damage. Okay. Um, so, but since on a sloop there's twice as many pirates on board, and losing one pirate is like the equivalent of losing like 15. Right? If one of your people on a sloop is AFK, that's a massive deal. When people on a grand frigate's AFK, not that big of a deal. You can win with bad matchups. They're just stressful and honestly annoying. Realistically, a single mistake or a bad prediction, and it will end up being a max battle, which is often a coin flip, especially in terrible matchups. It's really hard to win a terrible matchup in max. It just is. That's just how it goes. You can, however, beat bad matchups. This longship sloop is probably the worst matchup imaginable. I can't think of a worse one, to be quite honest with you. It is definitely winnable. The biggest thing is to avoid trading shots at all costs. If they could possibly shoot back in the way that you're going to shoot them, don't go for it. Just turn away and wait for another chance. It takes a while, but that's how you do it. Play slow. I mean, it's so important to play slow. Gain distance, let them waste their moves, and abuse their low moves to get damage on it. It's annoying, but it's a base without mirror bad matchups. Um, while they are chasing you, you more often get the chance to fire risk free. So there are chances you can fire once, and if they get hit, great. If not, meh. When they're out of moves, then you can hit them hard. Then the then the real challenge begins of trying to grapple them without getting blown up. Not necessarily easy, because then you're not even in the worst spot, but it happens. Now, pushing for ultimate. For those who don't know, ultimate's highest rank. You should, but expect it to take a lot of time if you're new to battle navigation. It just does, because it takes a little bit to get used to it. However, payloads on smaller ships, as it's easier to fill and keep ramp high. Um, you need to fight very hard bots. Basically, what you want to do is take the difficulty ticker to the max, move it down one, move the other ticker to the max further so it will go. Basically, you want to fight the second hardest bots possible. I recommend on the Baglow and Osprey on a nearly max difficulty, max every single ship, and then try to get initiative early if you can. Max the ship and then grapple as soon as possible. Um, so Grand Frigate Pillages are really easy to play. However, because you fill the ship so low amount, and the people that fill them tend to be like anyone you can grab, so they tend to be lower on rank, your ramps are going to be low. Fighting low ramp ships in a high rank, recipe for disaster because your rank will drop. It happens. You're not going to get a lot of ultimate rank with it. It's fun though, so I mean, depends what you want. Um, so if you do want to push for the top 10, Like a lot of it is just grinding. I'm gonna be real with you. A lot of it is just grinding, spending the time to do it. Fighting really hard bots and then spending a lot of time will just take forever. So keep that in mind. Um, you just move the Intrarch like not Osprey, but Wissa in between. God, what the name of this? Too fucking honest. Past Barbary, things like that. Inter Ocean Arch. Um, so bonus. Farming for Kraken's Blood. So it's basically the same strategy as farming for Ultimate rank. Battleground Osprey. You do want to be more selective with jobbing. Don't job someone novice able to clear alts. I don't do that anyway. Most times, it feels like a lot of the time they're either gonna bot, which I don't like, or I don't mind playing with new players. So they tell me and they tell me, hey, I'm new, can I join? I will let them. I don't mind. Um, but normally I just require distinguished or at least respect or at least why you distinguished in like a one major power proposal. It's really easy to get distinguished even with the inflated ratings, and things like that. Um, so more deliberate BNAF. Always maxing so your runs are very decisive. You want to get your ramp up as much as possible. You also want to make sure that you have a low turnover on your jobbers because jobbers that join, fight, and then leave really tank your ramp. Um, it does sometimes take a bit to ramp up the KB levels. It really does, especially if you have turnover. But as long as you keep winning, you normally will stay there. I farmed up to 13 Kraken's Blood in one sitting. No, really, 13. Um, you know what made me rage quit? is it was a rumble, and I had just done a treasure haul, and a super hard rumble appeared out of nowhere, engaged me, and that happens when you do a treasure haul. Ship will come and engage you in a way that you can't avoid. And then we lost two Kraken's Blood. No, not two, three Kraken's Blood in one battle. Re-engaged, I didn't get any back. I lost more Kraken's Blood in one battle than most people ever get. So, happens. I do want to thank you all for watching and spending the time to learn and to appreciate this. If you have any other suggestions, anything like that, feel free to leave it in the comments or send me a tell and let me know you liked it when I'm online. If you're looking for a good crew, New League of Shadows on Emerald is always willing to let people join. We have a Discord. We have a lot of very active people on board. We do competitions, do pillages. We offer training as well. We have people doing classes in shops, how to do different puzzles. We have bilging. I'm the battle knife instructor. We have gunning, alchemy, and people at carp as well. And we're looking to start classes for the crew very very soon. All right. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.